change agent running finance transformations at both UBS Investment Bank and Morgan Stanley. I've also was the CEO of a private bank in New York. Before last year, I actually started up and has taken an AI course, and with a bit of luck, hopefully in a month's time, I'll graduate with a AI engineering certificate from Microsoft. So that's who I am. Thank you very much.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. Stacey?
What a show off, this guy. Now, I'm so pleased to be alongside two of my my new favorite people as well. My name is Stacey Bishop, everyone. I'm coming at you live from my parents' house in Monette, Missouri, where I grew up, where I also spent the bulk of my career working for a little company you might have heard of called Jack Henry & Associates, just down the road, where I continue to have friends and family working there today. I grew up inside the banking space. Now, I guess I should say I'm growing old inside the banking space. But
not possible.
Oh, thank you, John. So for me, my career has spanned both working inside banks of various sizes, community, regional banks as well, and more specifically, the bulk of my career spent at a fintech organization selling to banks. And that is what I do these days. Work with companies that have an interest in working alongside of banks or credit unions and facilitating a need that they have that a solution can address for them. That's a big part of what I do, as well as helping community bankers enter into the embedded banking space and work alongside of fintechs with bank sponsorships. So, John, why don't we hear from you, sir? Why don't you tell us a little bit about the man that brought this group together?
Well, thank you, JC. I have been building regulatory reporting systems, integrated regulatory reporting systems since 2011. Did some work before that for various software companies. So my background is primarily, I have a few more gray hairs than both of you, I think, but I am been working in and around the financial services space in a concentrated way for the last 11 years. And Jeff and I first met when he was at Morgan Stanley about 10 years ago. And interestingly, Stacey, we had a conversation while we were, helping Morgan Stanley figure out how to move forward about this exact topic that we're going to talk about today. And even though AI was a glimmer in someone's eye, perhaps at that point, the tools weren't available then to do what we're going to talk about today. So what's really exciting for me is that sort of we're culminating, a lot of conversations over the years and with various innovations in technology with a solution that I think is both practical for community and regional banks and offers the same benefits as those, for the top tier banks.
Yeah, I very much, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Before we get into it though, John, do you mind if I just ask, for the purposes of everyone joining us here on the call today, when you say regulatory reporting, if we have any new individuals, new in their career, new to banking, what does that mean for you?
Well, the regulatory reports come in really two flavors, Stacey. One of them is the SEC reports. You can think of 10Qs and 10Ks, which have a lot of text, a lot of numbers, and the purpose is to explain what's going on in that public institution since the last quarter that they reported. So it is the challenge with SEC reporting is to get the text right. And there's a lot of talk about how AI can have a play in generating the text based on presenting it with a series of numbers and how that'll make transparency in terms of SEC reporting even better as time goes on. Albeit with the risk that AI gets it wrong. Jeff's going to touch on that in his presentation. But the other type of report that we're going to focus on today is more, people think of things like 1040s, the tax reports that they have to do. And so we're going to talk more about how you can streamline the process of getting the data from the bank's core application to these forms in a way that's predictable, the way that's transparent, so that you can look at every step in the process. And the process will save time because they're not going to be relying on a lot of manual steps to make it happen.
Okay, don't let me put words in your mouth here, John. But what I think I heard you say was the regulatory reporting concept and the terms we're going to be speaking of here today are akin to what we as individuals think as the 1040 that has to be completed and filed for our own personal tax report. So this is the 1040 for a financial institution that is FDIC insured and must be reported on a quarterly basis.
That's right, Stacey. And we've gosh, Jeff knows this even more than I do, but there are somewhere around 50 or 55 regulatory reports that banks have to generate, depending on their size, the complexity. Regulatory agencies want to know about risk. They want to know about the quality of the assets that banks have. And so there are just a ton of reports. So anytime you can save a bank time and improve the accuracy, it reduces the risk that they're going to make mistakes or be late. Either one of them, it's just all kinds of bad things can happen. So our goal is to help them do it right and do it for as little as possible financially.
And I would say, look, the regulators use this data. Like it's not, to keep an eye on, how good a bank's being able to produce information. They actually take this data in to make assessments of the liquidity, the overall assessment of the banking environment and economic conditions of the United States, predominantly because we're focused in the US. So, it's a big deal. So getting it accurate and getting it timely and into the regulators is important.
It is. And this is what we would traditionally in this space refer to as the call report for all intents and purposes, John.
That's one of them. Yep.
Very good. One of the big ones, one of the ones that has been just that, it's that necessary thing that has to be done every single quarter. And at least throughout the stages of my career, there are solutions, and even in which my prior employers would provide mechanisms to make it easier. Still wasn't a fully automated type of solution. I would say that the three of us can also just attest to the fact that everyone's favorite fill in the blank, fill in the gap tool, Excel, plays a prominent role in this type of regulatory reporting. And that's one of the concepts we're going to dig into here today as we get going. But for the majority of individuals joining us that might not have heard of regulatory reporting before, or this might be a new concept, or it's outside of your purview, our goal here in this conversation is to help understand sort of where we've been. And it is somewhat difficult for modern bankers with so much tech available in all other areas of our lives to sit here and have to suffer through producing the regulatory reporting on a quarterly basis. And our whole purpose around this discussion today is to talk about a better way using especially the first topic that we're going to get into here with Jeff. And that is AI. I know it's not a novel concept for the past couple of years. We hear about AI everywhere, Jeff. So why don't we go ahead and get into our discussion here, if that serves, if that aligns with each of you gentlemen. Perfect. All right. Well, Jeff, my first question is right there in big, bold letters. Kind sir, can you tell us what is the biggest pain point that banks that are listening in on this conversation, or that will find it later in a recorded version, are dealing with when it comes to their quarterly regulatory reporting?
Thank you, Stacey. Well, I would love to be able to say this is a new problem, but it isn't. This has been the same problem I've had in 30 years, and it comes down to data, and particularly bad data. If you consider where the regulatory reporting space is, that that function sits at the bottom of the barrel in terms of the sort of the front to back process. They inevitably, regulatory reporting never generate data themselves or own data specifically. They usually fed data throughout the process. Mm-hmm. And so, however, they are responsible for the numbers that go to the regulators, and trying to fix bad data from within the regulatory reporting team is very, very difficult, because they are just that far removed from the process. So again, fixing data is critical. Everything from, understanding how you interpret the data for the rule sets to the speed of the close, all depends on having good quality data into the reg space.
I'm sorry, Jeff, go ahead. I do want to dig into that a little bit with you. When you say bad data, is this incorrectly mapped data? Is this data that a bank has erroneously placed in the wrong field on a report? What does that mean to you? Or just all around just wrong? What does that mean?
So,
or all of the above?
Yeah, no, it is all of the above, unfortunately. Okay. So it could be missing data, this counterparty field has not been populated, and the classification of this counterparty therefore is missing, and there's no way the rule can be applied to that. You could have inconsistent data, two counterparties, duplicated in two different systems, one saying it's a state and municipality and the other saying it's a US government, and both of those coming into the same place. And now you've got a conflict of which one's right. And so,
how do bankers figure that out? Is it manual? Is it?
Yeah, inevitably it is. And it's so you're doing it in the close. You're doing it in a time-sensitive period. I was a product controller, and my job as a product controller was to get the P&Ls out to the business. Correcting for the right counterparty classification was something that I did as a secondary step because, I got a reward because my trader wanted to see their daily P&L. The regulatory person, however, couldn't do his or her job if I hadn't done my job and passing them rubbish data. So that level of complexity in that process gives it, it creates problems for the reg team, and they waste a lot of time in a critical period trying to chase down where did the data come from, why is it, what controls are on that data, who owns that control, why is it missing, and they're doing that rather than analyzing and interpreting the results. And so, that is I would say that would be the second piece of the puzzle. Data quality dominates, but understanding how to take that data and then apply it to the certain rules and making sure that they understand, there's always ambiguity in certain interpretations of the rules. Some of it's quite clear, some of it's not. And that requires, knowledge of the product, knowledge of the regulation. It makes the reg team have to make judgment decisions. Sometimes they have to make escalations of that judgment. All of that takes time in a time-pressured situation. So, data quality and rules interpretation are the real big two items, I would say, that, data quality is something that reg don't own. Rule interpretation is something that they usually do. So it's a little bit, they have a little bit more ownership of that process, but it still takes time to understand when an organization doesn't have clear rules and interpretations.
Well, it's clear to me that this could be the various pieces and parts in time, a painful process. I can see why this whole element around bad data and then how you get to where you find the quote unquote good data could be difficult. And it happens every single quarter for these individuals. I would probably gain 10 pounds every quarter because I eat my feelings. So I would be sitting there going, but I'll tell you what, well, why don't we go?
You can see why I don't have much on top. You make a good point though. Look.
Yeah.
Close times dramatically improve when you get better data. Just being fast is actually, with bad data, is just being faster with chaos. And when you have multiple fragmented systems, the reg team have a very hard time of trying to understand how to find it, how to understand it, how to correct for it. And it's like navigating a maze, and you need a good helper to sort of navigate that maze, which is why data lineage, and I know it's sometimes a horrible word, but data lineage becomes so important to be able to help understand where data is coming from, who owns it, and why it's poor. So that is an important conversation.
Yeah, and that's a piece I know that Jon has shared with me in the past. And Jon, I'm not going to let you off the hook. Don't just think because Jeff mentioned the term data lineage that you do not get a question about data lineage coming up. But I would say, why don't we go ahead and move on to the next piece here? And I think, Jeff, this kind of mentions, it pulls into that lineage concept that you're both on the hook for now, because that is this concept of knowing where data came from, right? And how do you find that? You have data pulling in across all sorts of deposit fields, deposit products and types, same thing on the loan side. You've already mentioned, Jeff, that sometimes the rules have some ambiguity as far as what information totals into which buckets that show up on which line of an associated report. So I find myself sitting here thinking, wow, this really can be overwhelming. No wonder bankers, modern bankers, are still using Excel spreadsheets to try to make sense of this. Yet I still think there's some imperfectness to that whole scenario. So why don't you tell me, Jeff, if you don't mind, that just how do you manage this? How do you manage the lineage when you talk about moving something from core or source system data into spreadsheets, into the ultimate reporting tool, and perhaps others that I haven't even mentioned?
Yeah, and I think you strike a good question, which is, Lineage was often thought of after the fact. I've been doing systems implementations for 30 years, and it wasn't until someone said, "Oh, we should really understand where that data comes from into that regulatory report." But we'd already implemented the system, already run. We were moving on to the next thing. That we didn't really come back and I know there's some people on the call who I used to serve, so I better be a bit careful because I shouldn't out myself. But Lineage is really the strongest when you embed it as a design principle, and therefore you put it into the pipeline. So as you implement front to back change, Lineage is one of the things that you design right from the start. It shouldn't be after the fact. If after the fact explanations, like, you're just then lumping it onto some other team to do something that they need to think of. So,
and that's what we're seeing here, Jeff. Is that what we're seeing here on this slide?
Yeah, very much so. In terms of, well, what does good lineage? When I talk about lineage, what does good look like? And in terms of that, good lineage is, you have a clear definition of what a field is. So, this is a maturity date for a certificate of deposit. It should be clear. It should be unambiguous as to what that means. So, if you have it written and have it understood, it's codified in a language that everyone understands, there's no misinterpretation. You also then can apply logic to that. Okay, how do you map it? How does it get aggregated? How do you transform it? If it's within 90 days, we'll aggregate all of the maturity dates of deposits within 90 days and we'll send it here. It should be clear and understood that you can take a field, you can transform it, and you can map it, but it shouldn't be happening in a spreadsheet on tab 54 on cell 96 by some bloke, G. Cavey, who implemented it 20 years ago.
I don't trust that guy.
No, I wouldn't trust him either. You then need to have, with anything, you need to have checks on that data. Ideally, those checks are controlled and in a way that is, this is not AI. This is just, machine automation, but making sure that you're reconciling that to source.
Yeah.
Don't build a better mousetrap. Make sure you actually go back and fix the data. Make sure the source is right. Reconcile within the process. You need to build in audit trails and control workflows, and it's hard to do that if you've got a massive spreadsheet that's doing regulatory reporting where you dump the data in and you merge it through different tabs. So Lineage gets lost if it's not really built front to back. And again, it's not Reg's responsibility. Reg are the consumers of the data. It's up to the producers of the process to make sure that they are delivering Lineage to the Reg function. It helps. Lineage really helps understand the question, how do you know the data is right? How can you, where did it come from? Who owns it? What controls were put on it? Lineage really supports that detective work. So, and that's an organizational construct. If the regulator asks you questions, it should be the organization, not regulatory reporting, that knows how to answer that.
And this makes perfect sense to me. And as I think about each of your expertise, Jeff, I think about you on these first three elements, these first three graphics quite a bit, your expertise in that of mapping data from source systems, from source teams. And then, Jon, I think of you quite a bit on, now that we have this data that Jeff has been talking about, that's good data, that has lineage that we can trace back, you're presenting the data logically and mapping back. I see that arrow going back to the mapping layer. So I see it from my very simple understanding of the conversation, you both in your unique aspects play a very pivotal component or a pivotal role in this graphic that Jeff has been speaking with.
Well,
is that fair to say? Go ahead, John.
I think it's two sides of the coin, because Jeff was saying how important it is to plan for where the data is coming from and what touches it and who touches it. But it's also critical to look back from where it lands and say, okay, how do we then look back upstream and have evidence that it actually did what we thought it was going to do? So I think of traceability as not just backing up, but also looking for the evidence, looking for okay, this happened on this date, and we know it happened, right? So the lineage is what you want to happen to the data. The traceability is making sure it did. And so I think it's important from an audit standpoint that we look at both sides of that coin. Both are critical, I would say, to data quality and compliance.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Well, I have another question for Jeff, if we want to navigate the slides forward. All right, Jeff, does what you're describing, creating this type of lineage, creating the infrastructure, doing it right from the start, does this change by bank type?
The short answer is no. Look, the rule, the concept of what we're discussing here, again, is neither new nor unique. It's something that we just, to varying degrees, the financial institutions have mastered. And the reason I'm hammering on about data is when we get to talk about AI, you'll see how important this is as we go into the AI conversations. Without a properly well-constructed data, we're going to have a fun time discussing the AI results. But the short answer is no. Look, what gets trickier, in smaller banks, and Stacey, you'll know this, in smaller community banks, you may have a Jack Henry or a FIS or a Fiserv. You sort of have a bank in the box, one solution. If it's wrong, it's wrong in one place and you can fix it. You may be talking about loans and you're talking about deposits. You still need, as a foundation, you still need strong definitions, control and reconciliation processes, ideally not a lot of spreadsheets, but, whether it's a big bank or a small bank, those foundational concepts hold true.
Yes. So
when you get to a larger organizations, now you've got loans, you've got deposits, you've probably got bonds, you've probably got equities, you've got derivatives. You may have, flow derivatives like interest rates and credit swaps. But you may also have, structured, credit derivatives and structured interest rate derivatives. Places where the same product will appear multiple times in multiple systems for multiple reasons, but it just becomes harder to understand where the data usually gets duplicated. Never a good thing. Hate duplication of data, because rather than having a bond wrong once, you may end up having a bond data wrong in 5 different systems. It's never really that clear who is, as you add more complexity, you get different layers of transformation and you get different layers of control, and that just muddies the water. When you go to global banks, you then end up having to do different things with different regulators. So we talked about the call report, but there's a whole heap of reporting for for CISL. There's whole different reporting for the prudential regulator in the UK. So they do different regulations. They also have different potential interpretations of the rules. So the foundation, though, Stacey, the foundation, if you build it solid, it's the same foundation whether it's a small bank, a medium bank, a large US bank, or a global institution.
So build solid, doesn't matter the type, the scale, the charter. This makes perfect sense. Just build it.
It just gets harder, but if the foundations are solid, the harder it gets in terms of complexity, the better the foundation is if you started from a good, solid base.
It makes perfect sense. Well, why don't we go ahead and advance on to the next slide? And this is where I know you've been dying to get into this topic, Jeff. I know with your focus here lately. So AI is one of these terms we hear used quite a bit. It's thrown around everywhere in banking these days. When you think in terms of AI in the regulatory reporting space, like where do you begin? Where is the highest leverage point of value created? Where should a bank consider this in the regulatory scheme, regulatory reporting?
So I actually had some mates over last week from the UK. They're both veterans of banking and have been around in the regulatory space for some time. And what I think would be useful just to step back and assess, what do we mean by AI in regulatory reporting? Because
Okay.
what was really interesting is they had different takes on it from what I had assumed people understood it to be.
Okay.
And I think there's a misconception that, look, it's simply you get the data, you open up ChatGPT, and you throw your data at ChatGPT, and it's going to produce your regulatory output and your narratives. And that the difficulty is somehow getting over compliance issues around using ChatGPT in-house. And we spent long hours debating over some fine wines the meaning of what AI actually is in regulatory reporting. And I hated to burst their bubbles, but if you could get past the compliance issues around exposing non-public sensitive data to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, you have to remember these are general purpose large language models. And these large language models are trained on prediction. And by that, I mean, if you type 1 + 1 into your calculator, you're going to get the answer of 2. How? Well, it's all built on some binary code. That binary code has strict rules, and there's strict adherence to those rules.
Mm-hmm.
When you type 1 + 1 into a large language model, it tries to predict the next most likeliest piece of text. So it's not doing calculation. Like, it feels like it's doing a calculation, but it says, look, I've been trained to know that if I see the words 1 and I see the words plus and I see the words 1 and I see the word equal, that the most plausible answer is going to be 2. So, these models are hugely advanced, smartest kid in the room by far, but it's plausibility, not precision. And that means they sometimes hallucinate. And if you've ever had a conversation with an AI that is hallucinated, it will tell you it's right. It'll swear that you're like, how certain are you? I am 100% certain that this is the answer. You should do that.
Yeah.
Only to find out that, once you tricked it up with a couple more prompts, it says, you got me on that one. Actually, the answer wasn't 1 + 1 = 4. It was 2. So,
I would love to read through Jeff's strings, his chat strings with his AI engines of choice, his AI tools. Wouldn't you, Jon?
Yes,
I think we'd see a lot of great, very funny conversations. So
I actually have given it a performance review, and on an annual basis, as in banking, you get a performance review, and I gave it a needs improvement, and I said, look, I am not happy with you, and you need to improve. And it said, I'm sorry, Jeff, I realized this is not good of me. And I kick myself because I'm speaking to it like a human, realizing even now that I know it's not a human and it's a prediction model. But what it does mean, though, when it comes to complex regulatory reports, is that if you give it a prompt, it's going to choose a text which it believes sounds right.
Okay.
Yeah. It's very good at telling you it is right. Even after 30 years, I start believing sometimes I'm wrong, but it's coming up with plausibility. So could you imagine going to a regulator and saying, look, we know the answer was wrong, but it was plausible. That's just not going to fly. So, that's why when we come to talk about LLMs or AI in the reg space, what you're not talking about is unleashing ChatGPT. What you're really talking about is making sure that you are constraining the ChatGPT and specializing it to regulatory reporting content. So making sure you're prompting it to your bank's data, your bank's rule set, your interpretation. It doesn't need to know what the top. A reg LLM doesn't need to know what the top restaurant in New York is, but does need to know, okay, for the RCE schedule, this is what the data from the bank is, and this is what the rules will be.
Sure.
And again, if you think about the large language models, they're trained on huge amounts of world data. And so what it considers normal may not be normal for your bank. So it doesn't know what your bank normality looks like. So it would be implausible for it to understand why you've given a counterparty a classification of X and Y, because it's trying to predict what it thinks the next thing is.
Based on the world.
Exactly, rather than grounded in your data and your rule sets.
Whew. You're going to give me a lot to think about from this conversation. And I'm sure anyone that's watching us live or visiting this from Jon's profile, watching this recording. Jeff telling us about this probability, not precision when it comes to AI, which is, I think, why we're seeing some of these suggested first use cases shown to the right. Yeah. Why don't we go ahead and advance then to the next area? And that, considering everything you've just told us, Jeff, we know AI is the smartest kid in the room. We now know that it is more focused, these LLMs, based on probability, not precision, and a broader view beyond just an individual institution. So that begs the question that we see here on this slide: just how far should we take AI in the regulatory reporting process? What do you think there?
It's a very good question, and it is ever changing and evolving. If you'd asked me 12 months ago, I would have told you an answer. If you'd asked me 3 months ago, that would have completely have changed. And even today, Anthropic, which does Claude, came out with a whole heap of new plugins, which I rushed to understand in case what I was telling you was going to be false. But it's fast and it's evolving. But what I would always say from a design perspective is you should consider two practical principles.
Okay.
Let AI propose, but require the human to approve.
Okay.
So, never get to a situation where the final decision is being done by the AI. And I would also design the process so that the human in the loop doesn't kill productivity. And by that, I mean, if you have to go to the LLM 5 times to get the answer, to review it 5 times, where you could have just gone somewhere as a human and done it once, then just go to the human action and do it once. Like some things are not going to be always set up to have the AI do it so that the human can review it. So you need to understand the limitations of your process, and then best decide where should the AI go. What I can say is I consider it as a sort of a tiered approach, as you see on that spreadsheet, on that slide. The first one is sort of automate the simple workflow. And this isn't AI. This is process automation. And this has been around for as long as you and I have been in banking, which is, create checks, have them run themselves, spit out the answers, that is just process automation. It's not AI. Mm-hmm. Where the next tier is what I call sort of AI as the junior. Back in the day, we used to have the preparer and the approver. So someone would come in and prepare the journal. They would then, put it through. But I would always come in as the more senior individual and review it and then hit approve. And that there, you could see in those type of activities, what do you want? You want the AI to do the heavy lifting. You want AI to sort of have a audible process, but you want the human to provide the review and hit the one-click approval button. So the sort of tasks I consider in tier 1 activities would be data matching, classification and tagging, variance commentary, exception triage. Those are the key things which sort of in that phase, that tier 1.
Got it.
In the tier 2, you've got AI really as an assistant, and it's supporting you by creating analysis that then you can really make a decision on. So in 1, you're really just checking has the AI performed the task that you think it should do. You're more of a reviewer. Whereas in the tier 2, you can outsource some of the grounding and opinions and the analysis for you to then review and make a decision on. So it's not that the AI is proposing an answer. It's just preparing analysis that can help you make a decision. And
Tier 2
activities would have material impact on your numbers or your compliance. There really is judgment involved. Like there's no clear A plus B plus C equals D. That requires human judgment to be in. Those are the type of roles where you want AI to flag issues, provide context, but really the review and analysis and solution sits with the human.
Got you. Okay. I'm looking at the time, and John, I very much want to hear from you. So why don't we go ahead and move on? Yep, here we go. So Jeff, when it comes down to AI and thinking, I was going to say in terms of the long term, 2 to 3 years, we've never thought of it as the long term of anything. 2 to 3 years seems like an eternity in this AI powered age. So when we think of the skill set that's going to be most valuable 2 to 3 years from now with AI and regulatory reporting through this lens, where do you land on this?
Yeah, look, it's good. The good news is good. I mean, I do not see it getting rid of regulatory reporting and the analysis that needs it. Like the human in the loop is really critical. Like as I discussed, using AI is like having a brilliant child with a PhD. It's capable, but you would never leave it unsupervised because it's likely to dismantle everything that it touches. So you have to keep the guardrails in place. But I would consider this. Look, I sort of wrote down 5 skills, actually 6 skills, but 5 of them are not new. They're the same things that you'd expect from the reg people on the call. They need to know the regs. They need to know the products. They need to understand data. They have to have a control mindset. They have to know how to automate and supervise. They as this starts moving along, where the sort of the 5th and 6th skills come in is sort of model awareness and model risk, and then AI interaction skills. And by AI interaction skills, prompt engineering is a big thing. So asking the right question of the AI. You get to put a generic answer in. Sorry, you put a generic question in, and you're likely to get a generic answer or its potential to hallucinate. If you give it a good prompt with clear boundaries and clear rules and clear objectives, it's much more likely you're going to get a better response.
Makes sense.
I think the next thing is you're talking about how do you train the model. I mean specialize the model to adapt to your rules and your data. So it's not really train, but it's make sure that the model knows where to go to understand what your rule sets are with how you apply information transformation to your data. So, that's new because we didn't really have to do that in the context of a model. And then it's looking at things like, did the model give the right response? So if I asked it to take 3 pieces of data and aggregate it to the right layer, did it work? Can I feed it back? Do I give it a good evaluation? So these are things that are new. And again, the magic's not in the model. The model's really interesting, but for regulatory reporting, it's the expertise of the people that are using it to help shape it and govern it is what really turns it from sort of a generic model into a precision regulatory tool. And the best reporting professionals in the future are going to be what they are today. They read the regs, they understand the products, they support, supervise, they have a control mindset, but they will know how to support the training and evaluation of the model. And they will also know how to do risk assessments on the model. Those are going to be the skills in the future.
And then they'll be the same individuals that make excellent decisions on the technology they use once they get the data out of the model to look at solutions like we're going to discuss with John moving in here. Well, why don't we go ahead and advance for? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. So all of that just enables the regulatory team to do what they should be doing. They don't train for years to mess around trying to write VLOOKUPs on data. Like what they should be doing and what they're trained to do, and whether it's a junior person or the most senior reg on the line, like what they want to do is understand why is that balance this quarter? Why was it that quarter? What changed? Does that make sense in the context of the business that we're running? And can I confidently stand in front of the regulator and give them a narrative that I can be 120% confident that I understand why that has changed? And that is a good place to be.
Sure. Now, is this the final slide that we're going to get to here, Jeff? Am I correct in thinking this?
Yeah.
Why don't we go ahead and just tackle this one super quickly? Because you mentioned that some of the skill sets that are going to be needed are knowledge of data models and just knowledge of the data itself. And I think that leads itself into this slide right here, is that, if you have two banks and they have identical portfolios, but this would be unlikely, but why do they sometimes get the different outcomes using AI?
So it all goes back to what we talked about. If you have two prerequisites to a good adoption of AI, is clear data, good lineage, controlled inputs, everything we talked on the first slide.
Sure.
Clear and understanding, transparent process. AI thrives on clarity. If you have a rule, do this, do that, but don't do this. Sometimes do this. It does not like that. The model tries to predict based on what it has seen before. So without clarity, it's just going to give you a confident sounding piece of rubbish. So, it dresses up results in confident nonsense. So you need to have that foundation. If I had to choose, data first, because you need that. Without good data, bad data into a good AI still gives you garbage coming out. But once you've got the good data, having a transparent codified rules just enables you to understand why the result set from the AI has given what it has given. And that allows you auditability, traceability in a way that supports the reg process.
Gotcha. Well, now I want to shift the spotlight to Mr. Church, who we have here on the call. We're going to put him on the hot seat. So, Mr. Church, Jon, tell us a little bit about just this concept. And I think back to teaching bankers in my past how to get information, how to produce regulatory reporting from a core system. And one of the first steps is you have the files, at least from that application side, compiled. And then inevitably, 99% of the time, people would take that data and pop it into the tool of choice, Excel. So why don't we talk through a little bit from your lens, the challenge of just getting data, getting the right data, not that bad data that we've heard Jeff talk about, getting it into the regulatory reports.
Absolutely, Stacey. Thank you. And first of all, I got to say, Jeff is remarkably, astute at being able to capture all this, and he hit a lot of the pieces. So if you don't want to ask me the question that you were planning to, that's fine.
No, I'm asking you. I'm asking you. You are not off the hook. It's.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I spoke for 43 minutes on data regulatory.
No. That was great. So first of all, I'm going to say, at the risk of jeopardizing anything that Jeff covered, I agree with him completely that a solid process is the foundation for generating the right results, as well as understanding when and how to introduce, new technology.
Sure.
I think the challenge for all banks today is getting the right data to their regulatory reports. I think anybody on the call or anybody that's ever done this knows that that's the expectation, that's the challenge. Fortunately or otherwise, the process for most, as you said, Stacey, includes the use of Excel. Now, before you put on the gloves to defend Excel, anybody, I agree it's a fantastic tool that serves so many important functions in the financial world. Unfortunately, it lacks certain key capabilities needed to build an effective data management process. We'll talk about some of them here, but I think the ones that jump to mind are Excel typically leads to the creation of bank-specific solutions that are difficult to maintain because, each bank employs a different combination of systems and standards. And because, with Excel, critical calculations are stored inside cell formulas. They're not very easy to find and fix if they're broken. And more importantly, Excel doesn't capture the history of events that resulted in the values that are used in the report. So any changes that were made to that spreadsheet yesterday are invisible to someone who's working on it today, unless they remember to manually record the change. Eventually, most banks copy their data from Excel or use an import function to transfer their data to their regulatory reporting system. Unfortunately, this makes it impossible to drill down from the report itself back to the details behind the data. So I think we've said several times that it's a two-part question, right? Traceability and lineage are two parts of the same equation. And people can think of lineage as being like almost like your family tree, and it shows how people go through the years and what people have, which children, and where they go. It's a lot more complicated than that when it comes to data, of course, but it's a map of how things started, where they did, who modified them, and then where they went to. Lineage is like finding the birth certificates or the gravestones. It's finding the proof that all that stuff in the chart actually happened. And that's what the auditors really zero in on, because while they like to see that you have a plan, they really care about whether you executed it and proving that you did.
Okay, so lineage is how we got here, the family tree. Traceability, was that the funding?
That's the birth certificates, yes. That's
birth
the
certificates and gravestones.
Yep,
Ooh, this got dark. It was happy.
Sorry,
I didn't mean to do that. I should have thought of a better example, but it just came to mind. Anyway.
No, it's a perfect example, and it's not that dark. Actually, very timely as we went through and got our children passports yesterday. So I was just in the hunt for birth certificates. Jon, what other ways do bankers get their hands on data for regulatory reporting? So Excel, it's a huge one.
Right. So there are a couple other ones, and I bring them up because these are typically very expensive to maintain, and they have to be maintained frequently because they are highly dependent on the regulations, as Jeff said before. So they do require care and feeding. And when we interviewed 7 of the top 10 banks in the U.S., all of them used direct data integration of some form, but they were spending millions to install, implement, and maintain them through the years as the changes in the bank happened, as they acquired other banks and brought in new products, and as the regulations changed. So let's, in the interest of time, let me see if I can step you through a very abbreviated process. And our goal with this process is to make sure that banks can get the advantage of the direct data integration at a fraction of the cost.
Okay.
So it starts with the same files that are used today to extract data from the core banking application. And the goal is to take those files, which contain sensitive information, and make sure that they stay within the bank's network. So one of the key tenets of our approach was, as much as possible, let's not duplicate the data or move it off-site. Let's keep it within the bank's framework. So the next step in the process that we go through is we apply these standard rules to, in effect, map the data. It's a process of understanding how the underlying transactions fit into the regulatory reporting framework. And once those fields have been assigned, then the next step, or really the last step that we have to automate, is aggregating the data using those mapped keys and then transferring the results to the regulatory reporting system. At this point, the people who are doing the reports can actually refresh their reports directly from this data that's been mapped and aggregated, and they don't have to be aware that all this stuff has happened in the background. They just need to know that if push comes to shove, they can look back and see at every step where the changes took place, where the mappings were, the decisions that were made, and if they were wrong, they can fix them. There's no black box here when it comes to understanding how the data was processed.
So the lineage and the traceability is what you're referencing there.
That's Jon, right. Sorry. So one more step. Please. I'll just finish here. The last piece in this, Stacy, is that the thing you just mentioned. They need to be able to see the detailed information when necessary, not all the time, but if they need to drill in, the system and this process that we talked about supports that.
That makes sense. Would you be able to put a picture to this or put a face to what we're describing here?
Yep. Let me see if I can show you real quickly. I'm gonna switch here and walk you through real quickly what this might look like if you use it in a system. So for those people who are looking at this, I'm going to switch here. You can, if you need to, use there's a button in the lower right-hand side of your screen that will expand this so that it may look better for you. But I'm just going to switch and take you through what this would look like to a preparer. Okay, Stacy?
Very good. Thank you.
So this is what's called InsightOne, our solution for regulatory reporting. And for folks that aren't familiar, this is the introduction of that call report that Stacy mentioned earlier. And for the purposes of this demonstration, we're just going to look at the schedule that deals with deposits. So
looks familiar.
Painfully so to some, I'm sure. this schedule basically takes deposit transactions and breaks them into different categories. Basically, who the counterparty was. That's this whole business of who the deposits were made by. And then it wants to know whether or not they were transaction accounts or non-transactions, because there's different risks and so forth associated with them. Now, what we can do with the data going through that process that I just mentioned is, with the click of a button, we can simply enable the preparer to refresh the values in their form. So now I've pulled the aggregated values that resulted from that whole three-step process I showed you. And at the click of a button, I can populate the form with those values. And we display both the previous value as well as the current value in the screen. So anybody using this can see what was there before, understand that there was a change, and be able to, flag it as needing additional research or accept it and move on. And to help them, we can allow them to drill in to the values by literally clicking, hitting a context menu and saying, show me the underlying transactions here. What makes up the value that I'm seeing on this screen? And we're reaching back now, and in that original data that we started with, we're showing them the account information and the values and when they were actually extracted. So someone can see, this is what makes up the number in my regulatory report.
So to bring this full circle then, Jon, this is that traceability back to the systems where the information's been gathered. You also referenced new and old data. And I know Jeff had shared with us previously that there was a time constraint period in which you're producing reports and then taking a look at those and then potentially reproducing reports, and you have different versions that you're working through until everything's finalized. Is that what we're seeing here on the screen? Refreshing the data and then tracing it back to the systems of source.
Yeah, this yes, exactly, Stacy. This saves someone from having to do an import function. Well, maybe they'll have to do it for some values, but in this case, we're actually pulling those values directly in. So it saves the possibility for someone to paste it into the wrong cell, or to possibly get some values from a different time than other values. So that creates inconsistency, which will lead to validation errors. This ensures that all the values get updated at the same point in time from the same source of data, which boosts the confidence a lot that it's all at least going to be consistent.
And Jon, from a traceability perspective, that in that description, the 22, all the zeros, 3387, that's the actual account number associated with that demand deposit account. So you've got that gives you that traceability back into the bank's extract that enables you to understand, okay, well, that's how this data ended up in that line.
That's right. Exactly.
Versus, Jeff, I think what you shared with us, having to try and find this manually, and an example you shared with us previously.
That's exactly right.
That sounds way less fun and much more time consuming.
Yes.
Well, it definitely can save. We've talked to a lot of preparers and they like that. The other one that they really like, and they posed this question to me, that one was looking down, sort of what makes up the value. The other was a problem that they confront every quarter is, what happens if a transaction can't be mapped? So we have a capability of running a query which looks for unmatched records. And so we can quickly zero in and pull up all the unmatched records related to the deposit information. And so what we're now is going back into the source of data again, and we're pulling the records where the values couldn't be mapped to one of those regulatory reporting keys. And so therefore they weren't in the numbers I just showed you. This is hugely important because if as a preparer, you want to know if any values didn't make it, because those are going to create an inconsistency at some point between the values you thought you were going to report and the ones you actually reported. So we're inspecting the detailed transactions. We actually go so far now as to give them an idea of where the error was that caused that transaction to not be mapped. In this case, the remaining term on this certificate of deposit was a negative number, which means that it already had matured by the time the as of data was reported. And so we were able to tell them, and they could go back in and have somebody work on that and resolve that issue. Or if perhaps somebody entered the wrong category here, you see here this one. Simple things like that are just, in the rush to get all the data in time. Sometimes mistakes are made, and this is a quick and easy way to find out where they are.
But that goes back to this lineage. So now you know the problem. Now you can, from the lineage, you can trace it back to the owner. The owner can go and update maturity date or change the classification, and it becomes less of a reg issue. It becomes more, okay, this is very easy. I spot this. I provide this back to the owner. The owner makes the fix. We hit the refresh, and the process cleans itself up.
Yeah.
Okay. And just for people like me that haven't confronted these unmatched records in the past, how are they solving for this today? What does that process look like?
Well, they have to compare the original source of the data and the value, the sum of all the deposits, for instance, at a very high level, which can number well into the thousands for these larger banks. And, the total of those deposits against the total that's being reported in the reg report. And literally it's going in and line by line, sort of matching to see what fell out in the process. So we flag the ones that fell out so that they can quickly zero in on them. And from a traceability perspective, we're actually capturing each of these steps. So if we had to look back, we can show them, like we are here, why they fell out.
Yeah, okay. I would say, Stacey, this is a big deal because it's very hard to do this through an Excel spreadsheet process. So having this clear on one screen just makes life so much easier.
I can not even imagine what those bankers that are muddling their way through this today, please give them a raise, because these poor folks, they need it, or they need InsightOne. Gentlemen, I know we have 3 minutes left. John, is there anything else you'd like to share with us in conclusion here?
No, really, I was just going to summarize, and you guys can read this. I think my shameless plug here was there are lots of things that a tool like InsightOne can do, and I encourage people to look and find a tool that fits with their bank's portfolio and the products that the bank offers. And really, there are so many reasons why it doesn't have to be just Excel. It can be Excel and a lot more. And some of the things that Jeff touched on, I think you can unlock the power of things like AI when you can build a process that works and understand where the data is and be able to train the models in how to use it. If somebody wanted to hear more, I encourage you, please look us up. We can schedule a more detailed, demonstration of the product. But in any case, definitely thank you Stacey, thank you for the opportunity to share this, and certainly thank you for the people on the call for listening.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This has been eye-opening for me, for someone that has been on the outskirts of regulatory reporting and perhaps oversimplifying it in my mind for way too long. So I want to apologize to all of the regulatory reporters and institutions that I've worked at for not just recognizing the sheer amount of work and effort that you were having to go through on a quarterly basis. My eyes have been blown wide open with the expertise of individuals like Jon and Jeff here on the call. And for that, gentlemen, I am eternally grateful. I hope everyone here on this call or watching after the fact will take the opportunity to connect with Jon and with Jeff, and to follow the links out here or the sites to learn more about this amazing solution with traceability that Jon had referenced, and the ability, those are just 2 use cases, and that ability to see unmatched records that Jon has built into his solution. And with that, gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you, Stacey. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Stacey. Really appreciate it.
Great stuff.
See you, Jon.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.